Okay, so this is our filmed interview based on getting you started in your thinking about your PACT teaching event. And just because the people viewing this won't know what you focused on last week in the PACT, I'll just remind them and remind you, of course, that you were reading Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian to your 7th grade class, Sherman Alexie's wonderful young adult novel. And that during the PACT week you were, among other things, trying out some new techniques to get your students questioning both what was happening in the novel as well as what they were anticipating was going to happen in the novel. So, as I told you before, I asked if you might start by saying, over the 5 days of your PACT, what were some things that you thought went particularly well in terms of getting your students engaged and thinking about some of the, as you point out quite frequently, some of the very deep questions that this book raises about race and class in particular. And also what are the things, some of the things you might want to do differently in the event that you, let's say, had an opportunity to teach part-time to 7th graders sometime in the future.
Okay, I think the things that went well was my ability to do new things in the classroom. Like, they're not really used to PowerPoints. Like, they're really used to posters and you know, having the professor or the teacher point out things on the posters.
Right.
So what I did was
a lot of posters.
Right. There's a lot of posters on the walls. Yeah. And those are good too.
Right.
But I think since my PACT was particularly zeroed in on inferences, I kind of wanted to just see how they would react to a PowerPoint and not just a lecture. Part of it kind of was, but I feel like we should probably, I think we should give them a little bit more credit for sitting there and actually listening to what something is or means. And granted, they were involved, but I kind of wanted to focus in on what an inference is, what makes an inference, and have them be involved as well. So I think they actually responded to the PowerPoint well.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, so I modeled some things. I had them interact with the PowerPoint. I also had them do a U-try at the end. So that went well.
Using, when you were asking them to do inferences, I didn't observe that class, of course, but when you asked them to do inferences, did you take examples from the novel, or did you take examples that were independent of the novel and said, if someone said such and such, or if such and such, or you saw such and such, what would your inference be?
I did both.
Both,
so
good, that's what I thought from your reflections, from your end of week reflections. I thought you had done both. But I wasn't sure.
I did both. One was a picture of a little girl in a wedding dress and holding flowers.
Pretty.
So I told them, like, you know.
So both visual as well as verbal text.
Yeah. And then I used the one that I modeled was from the book. And then they did one from the book. Right. So
that's so interesting, because when I was just starting teaching myself, I was observing a class taught by a fellow named Hart Day Levitt. So this was an East Coast class, and as you might suspect from that name, people don't have names like Hart Day Levitt in California. So anyway, but anyway, he'd written a book called Stop, Look, Write. And the book was a series of photographs that he thought were inference generating photographs. So he would just have these are high school students, and he would just have his students look at these photographs and write what they inferred from a photograph. And as the book progressed, the inferences became more complex and deeper.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I have to say, I read some of the writing that his students did, and they weren't writing about photographs. They were writing about books they were reading, and they were writing about other topics, argumentative topics, things like that. The writing was just absolutely mind-blowing.
Really?
I mean, I thought, whatever this guy's doing, he's got the magic sauce.
I might need to get that book.
Right. Yeah, I've got an extra copy actually.
Okay.
Yeah, remind me.
Okay,
I'll bring it out to you. Yeah. Okay, so the inferences and the PowerPoint. Other things that you felt went particularly well in the forwarding.
I think that developed a character analysis chart, which focused in on just another way of creating inferences. So it focused in on different characters,
right.
Describing the characters, and from the text evidence and the way they describe the characters, what kind of inferences can they make based off that?
Right.
So, and I try not to make the week repetitive. So, for me, and I think for the kids, it didn't really seem that way, especially incorporating the Four Corners activity.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
They really liked it.
Yeah, and just describe the Four Corners activity, just because, as I said, that was the day that I was there observing you. So, what was it that you did, and how did the kids respond? Yeah.
So the idea, is not original from me,
right.
But I thought, okay, if I can get the students up and out of their seats, but having them do something meaningful, but what can I do? So I thought that if I can develop my own inferences, and inferences that or just topics of the book that we've talked about,
right?
And maybe not necessarily in the same way, but we've kind of floated over those moments of the book, have just some statements about it. And so what I did was I put them on the projector, I read it out loud, had them read it, and they had to make a decision. So one, this requires them to first decide, what do I agree with, what don't I agree with, and it's very independent. They have to decide amongst themselves. They don't decide with their classmates yet, and so they go to either sides of the room, and they write down why they agree or disagree. And why they agreed or disagreed with the statement. Right,
agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, hence the Four Corners,
So it's not just I agree or disagree, they have to tell me why, and that kind of naturally requires them to take text evidence and their own background knowledge and put it together.
Right.
So then they write the post-it on a post-it, and they put it on the poster, and then they discuss what they wrote, and then we all share out at the end. And it's kind of cool because you see where students are at, in their thoughts about the book and about certain statements. And that kind of helped me decide how I can continue the lesson on inferences and just like the content of the book.
Right. What sense were they making of what they read? How were they using that to predict what was going to happen next in the book? What was going to happen with Rowdy? Whether or not Junior was going to stay at the prep school that he was going to? It seemed very good to me. I thought it was great. The thing I remember when I observed that, I suggested that once students write down whether they agree, disagree, strongly disagree, then they read what they've written aloud to one or two other people in their corner, just so they don't have sort of random chat in the corner, and then they can select someone who they think represents the strongest agreement, or disagreement with the point of view. So but it does capture a lot of that chattiness of the second grade class. Okay, if I could ask you to turn to the countering part of of your reflections on the PACT and say, what are some things you felt did not go so well that you'd like to do differently if you had a chance to teach this? Same week all over again.
Two things I wish I would have done differently. One was in the PowerPoint, I wish I would have been a little bit more. I probably should have practiced more on how to present the information. A little bit more elaboration on my part, and because I'm still trying to figure out when to elaborate on students' answers, when to step back and just say, okay, anyone else, so they're speaking, we're trying to figure out how to say their answers. So sometimes I felt like I was rushing, or I didn't explain as I should have, like in just certain moments of the PowerPoint.
Right, and that reminds me that one of the things that I thought was very good about your preparation for the PACT is you said prior to the PACT, I'm really going to dedicate this week to going slowly and carefully and making sure that my students are following and sort of slow the whole process down.
It's funny, I did as far as just like making sure everybody had everything.
Right.
But I think as far as the content of what I like, just the questions I was asking.
Right. Yeah.
I should have been a little bit slower on that part.
Yeah.
I did make sure that, did everyone do number one, or, does everybody have this down?
Right.
I wish I would have been just a little bit more, asking for more clarification.
Yeah.
Or checking for understanding.
Yeah.
I wish I would have been more selective